This is the Ielts listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to part 1.
A tutorial between 2 students and their tutor. The students are doing a research project on computer use. Listen to the conversation carefully and answer questions 1 through 5. First, you have some time to look at the questions. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 through 5.
Dr. Barrett?
Sammy, come in. Is Irene with you?
Yes.
Good. Sit down. Right. We're looking at how far you've got with your research project since we last met. You decided to do a survey about computer facilities at the university, didn't you?
That's right. We decided to investigate the university's open access to a computer when they need one, so we thought it would be a useful area to research.
Good. It's not a topic anyone has looked at before, as far as I know, so it's a good choice. So what background reading did you do?
Well, we looked in the catalogs in the library, but we couldn't find much that was useful. It's such a specialized subject. Hardly anything seems to have been published about it.
And as well as that, the technology is all changing so quickly.
But the Open Access Center has an online questionnaire on computer use that it asks all the students to do at the end of their first year, and the supervisor gave us access to that data. So we used it as a starting point for our research. It wasn't exactly what we needed, but it gave us an idea of what we wanted to find out in our survey. Then we designed our own questionnaire.
And how did you use it?
We approached students individually and went through our questionnaire with them on a one-to-one basis.
So you actually asked them the questions?
That's right. We made notes of the answers as we went along, and actually we found we got a bit of extra information that way as well, about the underlying attitudes of the people we were interviewing by observing the body language and things like that.
How big was your sample?
Well, altogether we interviewed a random sample of 65 students, 55% male and 45% female.
And what about the locations and times of the survey?
We went to the 5 open access computer centers at the university, and we got about equal amounts of data at each one. It took us 3 weeks. We did it during the week, in the day and in the evenings.
Not the weekends?
No.
So presumably your respondents were mostly full-time students.
Yes. Oh, you mean we should have collected some data at the weekends from the part-time students? We didn't think of that.
Okay. It's just an example of how difficult it is to get a truly random sample. So how far have you got with the analysis of results?
Well, everyone agrees there was a problem, but we're more interested in what they think should be done about it. The most popular suggestion was for some sort of booking system. About 77% of the students thought that would be best. But there were other suggestions. For example, about 65% of people thought it would help if the opening hours were longer, like 24 hours a day.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Choice 1. Listen to the following talk and choose the correct answer for each question.
The Atlantic Ocean, named for the legendary lost island of Atlantis, has made up for the romantic origin of its name by becoming the most important commercial highway in the world, yet traces of romance continually mingle with the business of the sea. For instance, the Spanish adventurers who first sought gold and silver in America frequently found their ships becalmed, usually on the edge of the steady trade winds, about 30 degrees north or south latitude. A sailing ship could carry only so much water, and as it lay motionless under a hot sun for days or weeks, the tortures of thirst were agonizing. The horses were generally the first victims. They had to be thrown overboard when they died or became crazed with thirst. Because the Spanish caballeros thought highly of their horses, even crediting them with souls, they suffered great remorse and believed the ghosts of the proud war horses were haunting the scene. They saw the restless spirits in their dreams and related their dreams to sailors. Whenever the mariners passed that way, they would see in the spray or clouds images of wild horses bearing down on them. They began to call the broad belts of calm the horse latitudes, the romantic name by which they are known today.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a conversation between a customer and a shop assistant.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
I'm interested in buying a radio. Can you help me?
Yes, of course. As you can see, we have this analogue radio on special offer today for £29.99. They are normally £35. We've also got a much more modern range of digital radios. These are over here.
Oh, yes. What are they?
They're the new technology. This one, for example, sells at £95. The analogue radios are looking a bit old-fashioned now.
Are they? What's so good about these new ones?
Well, the main advantage with the analogue ones is, of course, cheapness. But the main advantage with the digital ones is the number and variety of stations you can get. Hundreds of them. All kinds of stations, playing music, rock, pop, classical, everything in fact. As well as news, current affairs, comedy, all sorts.
What about the sound quality?
The quality is very good. Under certain circumstances, you can get amazing sound quality with analogue, but this is usually with very expensive radios which would normally be part of a hi-fi sound system. We have lots of those on the 3rd floor if you're interested. The second great thing about digital is clarity. You get no interference. Well, less interference than with analogue. You get a very clear and clean sound.
Well, I want a radio for the flat I share with 3 other friends of mine.
Well, you want something that will last. The analogues come with a 1-year guarantee, but the digitals have a 2-year guarantee, which is extendable to 3 years if you pay an extra £26. The main disadvantage with analogue is that it will be turned off in a few years. We don't know exactly when, but sometime.
But what about the batteries? I've heard that they use a lot of batteries.
That probably is the one disadvantage of the digital radios. The battery life is not very long, but they all come with rechargeable batteries, which really solves the problem.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So, how would you like to pay?
Cash.
I wondered if you had a Robson's store card?
Do you know, I think I do. Here we are.
Oh my goodness, I haven't seen one of those for a long time. Those are the old value cards. Now you can get a super value card, which is even better value.
Really? I don't know what to do.
Well, I can change you onto a super value card if you want. With the super value card, you get double the standard number of points and your free credit period is longer. With your old card, you get 1 month's free credit, but you can get 3 months free credit with the new card. The interest rate is a bit higher at 22.5% rather than 18.5%, but if you're careful, you don't have to pay interest at all.
Well, I'm not sure about that. It seems better in some ways. Can I continue to use my old card?
You certainly can, until they withdraw them, which I'm sure they will before too long. But with the super value card, there are special card-holder-only days, 2 per month, compared with 1 per month with the old card.
I see. My old card gave me free delivery too.
That's right, free delivery within 20 miles. The super value card gives you free delivery up to 50 miles.
Well, that sounds good. I think the old card was free too.
With the super value, there is an initial fee of just £12, and then it's very good value.
I think I'll pay cash.
Very good, madam.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear part of a talk on cultural research.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Having referred briefly to the general definition of culture, I want to move on to an example of cultural research in action, a real example of what researchers into culture are doing. This is a study done in 2004 into the global teenager hypothesis. Now, the global teenager hypothesis states that the values and attitudes of teenagers all over the world have become very similar, that teenagers are part of a global culture, rather than a national or a regional one. This study investigated the subject of materialism in 3 different cultures. It asked if teenagers' attitudes to materialism were similar or different in those 3 different cultures. I'd like to go through the main points of this study because I think it demonstrates the interest and usefulness of this kind of research. The research took a sample of 556 high school students of between 14 and 17 years of age from 3 countries. The three countries, being also three differing cultures, were China, Japan, and the USA. The high schools were in medium-sized cities, and the students came from middle-class areas. There were 172 respondents from China, 168 from Japan, and 216 from the USA. The students were asked to reply to a questionnaire or survey, which consisted of 7 statements. They were asked to say if they agreed or disagreed with the statements. The questionnaire was filled in during the students' regular class time. I'll give you some examples of the statements in the questionnaire. And, by the way, if you want to look into this in further detail, I've got the reference here. Let me see. Oh yes, it's the International Journal of Consumer Studies, Volume 28, Number 4, of September 2004. The first statement was, "It is really true that money can make you happy." Respondents were asked, as they were asked about all the statements, to give their answer on a scale of 1 to 7. 1 on the scale indicated, "I strongly disagree." 4 on the scale was neutral. And 7 on the scale was, "I strongly agree." The second statement was, "My dream in life is to be able to own expensive things." And the fifth was, "Having the right possessions is the most important thing in life." Let's look at some of the results.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
I'm sorry.
Let's look at some of the results. With regard to the first statement, it was the Japanese teenagers who agreed most strongly that money could make you happy. The Americans were second, and the Chinese agreed least. However, regarding one's life dream being to own expensive things, it was American teenagers who agreed most strongly with this, and the Chinese who agreed least. As regards the fifth statement about owning the right things, the Americans agreed less strongly than the other two groups. It was the Chinese who agreed most strongly with this statement. I haven't been able to analyse all aspects of the study in this lecture, but it does suggest that the hypothesis is not supported by the data. It may be that the culture of the USA is more individualistic, whereas the Chinese culture is more collectivist or communitarian. However, it does not seem to support the global teenager hypothesis. As always, this is something on which we need to carry out more research.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You'll hear a discussion about how to manage time.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's discussion is time management. It's very important that you develop effective strategies for managing your time to balance the conflicting demands of time for study, leisure, earning money, and job hunting. Here is an exercise which will help you to identify areas in which you might be able to improve your time management. Try to answer the 40 questions as honestly as you can, and then score yourself from 1 to 4 in each area. You have 5 minutes to finish them. Okay. Please stop and look at the screen. According to your answers, you can find in which area or areas you get the minimum scores, and I can give you some strategies to improve them.
I find I get the lowest score in the area of using lists. I don't have the habit of keeping a list. What use does it have?
Keeping a to-do list is a useful reminder system to tell you of when you need to do what. Don't try to remember everything in your head. Carry a pen and paper or organizer wherever you go to write down the things you need to do, including appointments and deadlines.
Do you think a daily list of tasks is necessary?
Yes, it is an excellent way to focus your mind on important objectives. Make sure you update your list daily, crossing off completed tasks and adding new tasks. Urgent or important tasks can be highlighted with an asterisk.
I find it difficult to set goals. How do I set myself specific and clearly defined goals?
You must make sure that these goals are realistic and achievable. To do this, you first need to examine your present situation and assess what goals are important to you and what action you need to take to achieve your target.
I am in the final year and trying to find a job. I can't combine the pressures of intensive study with finding time to apply for jobs.
Sometimes you need an alternative route to your goal in case you have to change your plans. For example, taking a relevant postgraduate course if you can't get a job.
Whenever the examinations sneak up, I start getting nervous. I don't know how to organize my time to deal with so many subjects.
You should have a regular venue for revision, such as the library, where you're free from distractions. Plan out a revision schedule or timetable so you devote enough time to each subject. You can also use past examination papers when revising to familiarize yourself with the sort of questions that might be asked. When revising, take a few minutes break every so often to clear and refresh your mind and allow some time off for complete relaxation.
I'm always late for everything. You know, the deadline of papers and seminar reports. Sometimes I cannot make decisions immediately, so I ignore them on purpose.
So you fall into the area called procrastination. I think it's important that you manage your fear of doing things you don't want to do, and realize that the fear is often far worse than any possible negative results. The best time to do something is usually now. Taking action generates the energy for further action.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.